It is June 9th, 1973. A chestnut horse named Secretariat is thundering down the home stretch at the Belmont Stakes, and he is not just winning this race. He is running a lonely, terrifying victory lap against the laws of physics. He crosses the finish line 31 lengths ahead of the nearest horse, shattering the world record with a time of 2 minutes and 24 seconds flat. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated athletic perfection. Now, I want you to fast forward over 50 years to right now. We are living in a sci-fi future of artificial intelligence, multi-million-dollar underwater treadmills, hyperbaric oxygen chambers, and genetic sequencing so advanced we can trace an animal's ancestry back to the exact blade of grass its great-grandfather sneezed on. Yet, in over half a century of relentless, billion-dollar scientific progress, not a single horse has beaten Secretariat's record. Not one. In fact, Secretariat's 1973 Kentucky Derby record still stands completely untouched today. Why is an entire global sports industry, backed by some of the richest billionaires on the planet, getting lapped by a ghost from the Nixon era? If you look at human beings over that exact same 50-year window, we have been smashing sports records like cheap pottery. Human runners have shaved massive chunks of time off everything from the 100-meter sprint to the marathon. We learned about biomechanics, we invented better shoes, we optimized nutrition, and boom, humanity got over 10% faster. But horse racing? The stopwatch just froze. If you take a graph of thoroughbred winning times in classic races like the Kentucky Derby or the English Derby, the line climbs steadily upwards from the 1800s all the way to about 1950. And then, right around the 1970s, that line hits an invisible ceiling and goes dead flat. It is a complete biological flatline. Right now, wealthy breeders are routinely paying $300,000, sometimes even $1 million, for a single highly transactional romantic encounter with a top stallion, expecting to breed a super foal. And what do they get for all that cash? Zero extra speed. To understand why all the money in the world cannot buy a faster horse today, we have to travel back 300 years to 3 guys in Georgian England who accidentally ruined everything. Back in the late 1600s and early 1700s, British aristocrats were obsessed with horse racing, but their local English horses were basically chunky farm animals that ran like shopping carts with a broken wheel. So, wealthy Englishmen started importing exotic, lightweight, hot-blooded stallions from the Middle East and North Africa. Meet the 3 founding fathers of the entire thoroughbred universe. First, you have the Byerly Turk, a war horse who was literally captured as battle booty from an Ottoman officer during the siege of Buda. Second, there is the Darley Arabian, a horse bought in Syria in 1704 by a British consul who didn't even care about racing. He basically just bought the guy because he thought he was a pretty handsome riding horse. And third, you have the Godolphin Arabian, who, if 18th century racing legends are to be believed, was reportedly discovered in Paris pulling a literal garbage cart before an Englishman recognized his quality and shipped him across the channel. Every single thoroughbred racehorse on Earth today is descended from these 3 imported stallions and a small handful of local British mares. But the story gets much, much weirder, because roughly 50 years later, in 1764, a descendant of those horses was born. His name was Eclipse, and he was the undisputed Michael Jordan of the 18th century. Eclipse was so aggressively, hilariously faster than every other animal alive that the British public coined a phrase: Eclipse first, the rest nowhere. He was never whipped, he never lost a race, and when he retired to the breeding shed, British horse owners lost their collective minds. Everybody bred their mares to Eclipse. And I mean everybody. Today, if you test the DNA of the global thoroughbred population, roughly 95% of all male racehorses trace their Y chromosome directly back to this one single horse. Let that sink in. The entire sport of horse racing is basically one massive, incredibly awkward family reunion. And just to guarantee that nobody could ever fix this genetic bottleneck, in 1791, the British racing elites did something catastrophic. They slammed the door shut. They published the General Stud Book and established a strict, unbreakable rule. To be registered as a thoroughbred, a horse's mother and father must both already be in the book. No outside blood is allowed, ever. They built an exclusive genetic VIP room, locked the doors from the inside, and swallowed the key. For 230 years, not a single drop of fresh genetic material has legally entered the thoroughbred gene pool. When you spend over 2 centuries breeding cousins to cousins to cousins to cousins, you do not get a master race of super animals. You get the animal kingdom's version of the Habsburg jaw. In conservation biology, if a wild animal species has an effective population size of under 500 individuals, scientists officially classify that species as critically endangered because the gene pool is too small to survive without serious birth defects. Want to guess the effective population size of the modern thoroughbred racehorse? It is between 100 and 200. The most expensive, pampered, heavily gambled on animal in human history is, genetically speaking, a critically endangered rescue case. And here is the brutal, unavoidable physics of why they cannot run any faster. When you play a role-playing video game and you put all of your character's stat points into explosive early speed, the game forces you to take points away from durability, bone density, and endurance. That is exactly what breeders have done to the horse. Scientists recently mapped the equine genome and discovered the exact speed gene, the myostatin gene, that dictates whether a horse is a short-distance sprinter or a long-distance stayer. For decades, breeders have obsessively selected only for the C-variant sprint gene to win early, high-paying 2-year-old races. But genetics is a game of trade-offs. The genetic correlation between raw sprint speed and endurance is negative. By breeding exclusively for early acceleration, we have stripped away their stamina and structural integrity. We did not build a better engine. We stripped the brakes off a Ford Pinto, strapped a rocket to the roof, and wondered why the wheels keep falling off. A modern thoroughbred is essentially a glass cannon. Their lungs and their hearts are already operating at the absolute theoretical biological limit of mammalian oxygen consumption. You physically cannot pump oxygen into blood any faster than an elite racehorse already does. Furthermore, a horse's leg is a biomechanical nightmare. They run on their middle toes, balancing 1,200 pounds of beast on thin bones that experience immense mechanical stress at 35 miles per hour. If you somehow engineered a thoroughbred to run just 5 or 10% faster, its leg bones would literally explode under the physical force of its own stride. We haven't hit a training wall. We have hit the biological wall of what horse bone and lung tissue can legally do on planet Earth. Now, I know what you are thinking. If the thoroughbred breed has been genetically maxed out and trapped in a dead end since 1950, how in the world do you explain Secretariat in 1973? How did a horse from 50 years ago break records that still mock modern sports science today? Here is the wildest twist in this entire story. Secretariat was not the logical result of superior breeding. He was a biological glitch. When Secretariat died in 1989, a veterinary pathologist at the University of Kentucky performed an autopsy. When he opened the horse's chest, he stared in absolute disbelief and initially thought somebody was playing a sick, elaborate joke on him. A normal thoroughbred heart weighs about 9 pounds. Secretariat's heart weighed an estimated 22 pounds. He was walking around with a gross, mutant, 2.5-time normal-size anime superorgan inside his chest. He did not run the fastest Belmont Stakes in human history because his pedigree chart was fancy. He did it because he was a 1 in a billion genetic freak with an engine the size of a Buick tractor. And here is nature's final, cruelest joke on the multi-billion-dollar horse racing industry. Geneticists believe that this massive heart mutation is carried on the X chromosome. Why is that a disaster for breeders? Because male horses pass their Y chromosome to their sons. That means Secretariat physically could not pass his giant heart directly to his male offspring. The single physiological superpower that created the greatest racehorse to ever live was a genetic dead end in the male line. The racing industry has spent 50 years and countless billions of dollars trying to Xerox a biological anomaly using a copy machine that has been out of toner since 1791. So nobody can fix it. The speed of the thoroughbred is permanently frozen. Except, that is actually a lie. We could fix it tomorrow morning if we really wanted to. The solution is embarrassingly simple. If your gene pool is a stagnant, inbred puddle, you open the floodgates. You let in outside blood. For example, if you look at the American quarter horse, a breed that allows wider genetic variation, those muscle-bound rockets can sprint a quarter mile at 55 miles per hour. A thoroughbred attempting to run 55 miles per hour would disintegrate into a cloud of dust and expensive orthopedic surgery. If horse racing authorities simply opened the stud book and allowed thoroughbreds to crossbreed with quarter horses or standardbreds, we could inject fresh genetic diversity, restore bone strength, expand the biological limits, and watch every record from the 1970s shatter within a decade. We could even use modern cloning technology to duplicate the fastest horses in history. But if you clone a champion racehorse today, the Jockey Club will ban it from ever setting foot on a track. Why? Because the rulebook strictly states that a horse must be the product of natural sexual reproduction between 2 registered parents. The racing bureaucracy will never open the stud book, and they will never allow outside blood. Because the entire multi-billion-dollar economy of horse racing is not built on speed. It is built on artificial scarcity and pedigree snobbery. If you admit that crossing an elite thoroughbred with a common ranch horse produces a faster, healthier runner, then those $300,000 stud fees vanish overnight. The monopoly collapses. The owners and breeders would much rather watch identical, fragile cousins run the exact same speed forever than admit their elite genetic system is an absolute scam. That garbage cart horse in Paris from 300 years ago definitely got the last laugh. We spent centuries engineering a living creature to run as fast as biologically possible, slammed the door shut, and locked ourselves inside. Now, speaking of humans arrogantly engineering a biological organism until it hits a catastrophic genetic wall and collapses into an inbred disaster, wait until you hear about what we did to the modern supermarket banana. But trust me, that story is a whole different level of crazy.